back in the, my name's Bob Mench. I'm a country boy that grew up in the Wilkinson area, went to Charlottesville High School, graduated in the mid-50s, and went on to college and service, and I was actually in my 30s before I could even start anything, because I'd been through service and college and everything, and appreciated, I think the good Lord decided for me to have a little bit of experience. But this is a story about two brothers that I wrote insurance for out in the western part of Hancock County. The one's name was Ralph. He was a tall, slender man of German descent, and he was a waiter at Buckley's Restaurant. Does any of you ever know Buckley's Restaurant? And Ralph always wore his cap crooked. He had a billed cap and he'd turn it crooked. And he was the best waiter that, I mean, people just loved for him to be their waiter at Buckley's. And he, besides being a waiter, he was a farm boy. They had a bunch of dairy cows they milked, and by hand. The stories goes back in the 40s later, and this was before I met them. And he was an expert on raising all types of chickens. He had individual hog houses, and he'd get these special eggs, and he would hatch them out. He had hens that would hatch them out, and he won several different championships and awards at the Indiana State Fair. He was a single fellow, a bachelor, but he was from, like I say, German descent, very musical. His mother had a degree from Butler in music, but she didn't get to use that degree because Depression times came there in the 30s, and she had to find a job that would pay hard cash. So she was a lady that had to walk because her husband left later, and he had a job on the north side of Indianapolis as a mechanic. So she had to walk almost 4 miles to work every morning, 7 days a week, and cook. And the boys, her two boys, Ralph and Harold, a lot of times would go with her, and they learned about cooking in this restaurant. And they weren't just ordinary cooks. I want you to understand that. Buckley's Restaurant made the best barbecue sandwiches, the best coleslaw, the best baked beans, pies that you could taste. I remember as a boy going there, especially on Sunday afternoon after church, and fried chicken. Oh, just melt in your mouth. You think your chicken's good now, you ought to taste that. It was just almost, and of course when you got out of church, you were hungry. And sometimes we even got to have pie, just depending on how Dad's billfold was. I'm talking about our situation. Well, let me go on and tell you about the youngest brother, Harold. He won a scholarship to Butler too. He was a violinist at New Palestine. And he really wanted to go on to Butler. But him and his dad talked about things. Of course, he worked in that restaurant. And he said, Harold, why don't you wait a couple years and save some money? And that, because it wasn't a completely full ride. He had to pay some on his schooling, and he agreed with his dad to do that. To do that. But in the interim, at that time, you could join the National Guard. This was after World War II. And you could get a few dollars for doing that during the month, which was important. So he joined the National Guard, and about a couple years after he got out of high school, he started some businesses. He worked at a factory in Indianapolis. Then Harold was great with flowers, just really loved flowers. So he had started that business, and all of a sudden he gets this notice in the paper, in the mail, that he had to have his business in order. In 14 days, he was going to go active. So he got rid of some of the livestock because Ralph couldn't do it all on the farm. And he got rid of sold his flour business that he'd started, quit his job at the factory. And he went into service, and lo and behold, they made a cook out of him in Korea. And up on the bulletin board there at the bulletin board in the dining room, there was a note that said, "I need a man to be able to take shorthand and type my notes." So Harold contacted the number, and you probably think, oh, he's making this up, but it's the truth. He was General MacArthur's aide. He typed all of his stuff in the Korean War. He did the shorthand, and then he had to have everything back on General MacArthur's desk at 6 a.m. the next morning after they flew in the helicopter. And General MacArthur and Harold were shot down 5 different times in that helicopter. They had big spotlights. They'd go over the American troops and they'd go back into the North Korean troops and see what kind of fortifications they were bringing in. I can't remember that mountain that they went up so many different times. Maybe it was Misery or whatever. But in the time, why General MacArthur was very good to Harold. He said, when his tour of duties 4 years ago, he said, "Harold, if you'll just stay another 2 years with me, I'll make you a warrant officer." Now that's not an officer. It's above the enlisted men, and it was paid more, and he got more privileges. He once told me, he said, "Bob, one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was I should have bought a geisha girl back from Japan." One of the biggest mistakes I ever made. But over this period of time, we have been friends for close to 40-some years. He's a real good friend of mine. We're still friends. He just happens to be on dialysis today, 3 days a week. And I try to contact him at least 3 days, 3 or 4 days, especially of an evening after the dialysis. But he has taught me so much and made life real. Of course, I was involved in service myself, and it was quite an experience to hear all the different things that happened with Harold, and I knew the different things that his brother had done. Just a little side note, Ralph, the boy I said was a good waiter at Butley's, he died of a massive heart attack when he was 34 years old. See, our lives, we never know what's going to happen. And Harold today is in his mid-80s, I think we need to, what I want to bring out in what I'm telling you, I think we need to spend time with some of our elderly people and find out what made them tick. See, we had his mother, I'm reiterating, his mother was a graduate of Butler University in music. She could have done anything, but her main focus was on those 4 children to be sure they had enough food and stuff in their bellies. And Harold could have been the same thing, but he said, his dad told him, "Why don't you work 2 years and try to get some money so you'll have enough money." Money was, going through the 30s. I think about what my dad told me. My dad never trusted banks. And I said, "Dad, why don't you trust banks?" And he said, "Well, Mama and I lost all our savings in 2 different banks back in the 30s. And you have to understand the context of what these people went through. And Harold and I talks about these different things, different times. But The essence is what I want to tell you is take time and spend time with some of your older friends, and don't be afraid to take time, and you'll gain more than you lose.